Have you ever wondered where your hard-earned tax dollars are going? It's a question that's likely crossed your mind as you filed your taxes or heard about the latest budgetary debates. Specifically, let's consider the allocation of these funds in the realm of international relations and military expenditure. It's a topic that's often shrouded in complexity and political rhetoric. Now, imagine comparing these actions across two different administrations, the current Biden administration and the previous Trump administration. In the next few minutes, we'll delve deeper into this question, comparing two different administrations' actions and the media's reaction. Now, let's take a look at the current administration's actions. President Biden has been knocking on Congress's door, requesting over $100 billion. Can you believe it? A hefty $61.4 billion for Ukraine, $14.3 billion for Israel, and over $9 billion for humanitarian assistance for Ukraine, Israel and Gaza, not to mention over $7 billion for border operations. Now, this is all well and good, but it's worth noting that this comes at a time when many Americans are grappling with soaring rent costs, food insecurity, stagnating wages, and healthcare crises. Yet the administration seems to prioritize international affairs over domestic issues. And while the President and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen firmly believe the US can afford to support both Ukraine and Israel, not everyone is on board. Some Republican lawmakers have expressed opposition to continued funding for Ukraine, highlighting the need for domestic focus. The timing of this funding request is also interesting. Amid the ongoing speaker battle in the House, the question of when these requests would be debated or passed remains uncertain. It's been communicated to the current Speaker pro tem Patrick McHenry, but the House is yet to resolve the Speaker issue. But despite these domestic hurdles and opposition, the President emphasizes the importance of approving this funding for Ukraine and Israel, citing America's national security. So, we see a substantial allocation of tax dollars to international affairs, but what about the previous administration? Let's rewind a bit and look at the previous administration's actions. During his tenure, Donald Trump was often criticized for his approach to international relations. He took a stance that was different from his predecessors, advocating for an America First policy. This meant focusing on domestic issues rather than engaging in overseas conflicts or providing substantial aid to foreign nations. For instance, Trump was known for his reluctance to engage in international wars. He stressed on multiple occasions that American resources should be used to address domestic problems such as infrastructure, healthcare, and employment. Despite this, he was often accused of endangering American security and interests. The media's response to Trump's approach was predominantly negative. Headlines criticized his isolationist policies and suggested that his reluctance to engage in international conflicts would allow threats to American security to grow unchecked. The contrast to the current administration's coverage is stark. Let's take the issue of aid to Ukraine as a case in point. When Trump temporarily withheld military aid to Ukraine in 2019, it sparked a media firestorm and even led to his impeachment. Fast forward to today, Biden's administration has requested over $100 billion from Congress for various purposes, including substantial funding for Ukraine and Israel amidst a domestic crisis. Yet, the media's response has been largely muted, even supportive. It's clear that the narrative surrounding these two administrations is not consistent. The same actions which were heavily scrutinized and criticized under Trump are now being portrayed in a more positive light under Biden. This disparity raises questions about the role of the media in shaping public opinion and understanding. As we can see, the media's response has been significantly different despite the similar actions. America has always been a generous nation, extending a helping hand to countries in need. We've seen this time and time again, with our country providing financial aid to nations struck by natural disasters, war, or economic crises. Our support has been unwavering, a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. But let's take a moment to flip the script. What happens when America is hit by its own crises? Hurricanes ravaging our coastlines, wildfires decimating our forests, and economic struggles hitting our heartland. Where is the outpouring of international aid for us in these moments? Consider the recent wildfires in Hawaii, a devastating disaster that displaced many and ravaged our lands. The international aid in response to this, minimal, if any. Now, this is not to say that we should stop aiding others because we receive less in return, but it does raise important questions about the balance of international aid and the need for mutual support. While America continues to support other nations, it's important to question why we don't see the same level of support when we face our own disasters. As we continue to scrutinize the allocation of our resources, let's also ponder on this aspect of international aid and cooperation. So, where does this leave us? Are we simply to watch as our resources are used without fair reciprocation? No. It's time for us to sharpen our critical thinking skills, to be informed about the allocation of our tax dollars, and to demand transparency and accountability from our leaders. Imagine if we, the American people, started asking tougher questions, started holding our leaders accountable for their decisions, and demanded more transparency in the allocation of our resources. Imagine if we knew exactly where our aid was going, how it was being used, and what we were getting in return. Would it make a difference? Perhaps. It's difficult to say, but what we do know is that staying silent and uninformed is not an option. It's time for us to think critically about where our tax money is going and demand transparency and accountability from our leaders. Remember, the power of democracy lies in our hands. Let's use it wisely.